Welcome to Founders Future, a podcast by Closers.io, where we dive into the journeys of innovative entrepreneurs and explore the road ahead of them and their companies. I'm your host, Olivia Salmons, and in each episode, we'll uncover the stories behind successful startups, the challenges faced along the way, and the strategies driving their future expansion. Today, we're excited to have Sam Pepin, the CEO of Centrica, joining us. Sam will be sharing his founding story and giving us a glimpse into plans for future growth. So let's jump straight in. Sam, welcome to Founders Future.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting
No,
me.
it's awesome for having you here. So can you take us back to the beginning? What specific problem inspired you to start
Yeah,
Core
absolutely.
Centrica?
Yeah, so the founder's journey, I was born and raised in Montreal, so I reside in Montreal for sake of staying close to my family. I had actually a background in sports. I played soccer, all the way football for the Europeans, all the
Mhm.
way to the national scene with Canada, which was lovely. Suffered a pretty major injury, which perhaps made that path perhaps sideways. But at the age of 9 years old, I was homeschooled. I was very socially awkward when I was young. Perhaps always had a gift for education and making the links between concept, which served me very well in school. I was very academically accomplished, and I graduated early, about 4 years early with a nutrition degree, technical degree here in Laval, nearby Montreal. And from that perspective, I started in business right in the midst of the pandemic. Like I think a lot of people did. You were, locked in your house all day, seeing all these great people basically doing fantastic travelings and building successful business and living a fantastic life. So perhaps that's one thing that really opened my eyes. And so, you know what? I need to work on a basically high tickets and perhaps a high leverageable
Hmm.
skill. So I chose sales. I had straight up to Facebook, found one post that was about basically being selling closer for a digital marketing agency in Chicago. Did extremely well with them, was their top performing seller before basically becoming head of business
Awesome.
development. And that was very lovely. Booked my basically nice book of contact for me. I found my first co-founder, which we basically created an algorithmic together, which was called Sam and Associates, which was basically a deal matching platforms for SMEs to find the right marketing agency for them. We scaled that extremely rapidly, in the seven figures in 14 months, and I was able to liquidate my shares. The specific problem that I saw before basically creating Centrica are numerous, but the main one was, first of all, the world of marketing now has been expanded very rapidly. And like any
Hmm.
industries, there's fantastic marketers, there's very poor marketers as well. And therefore, there was this lack of credibility, I felt like, where a lot of people perhaps misunderstood marketing for an expense and not an investment. And perhaps I was trying to accomplish that in a professional fashion. It's with basically coming up with a concept, with a model that will be unreplicatable, but very novel, very unique. And we did that through a relationship that with the Learning Code Institute, which has been spending the last 40 years in understanding neuroscience and brain structures that basically create what we call meaning networks and drives decisions. And I've met that guy when I was doing a speaking engagement in Denver. Sit down with him. He said, Sam, I have this great concept in neuroscience. Do you think we can do that, but in business development? I said, I never heard of that, but let me try. So I stepped down for 4 months and thought about ways to incorporate the data-driven initiative that I was doing at Simon Associates and the neuroscience, and we did it. And we called it the meaningful marketing process. And it's a four-step process, which we lead mainly basically market companies, but also a few 8,000 companies into basically a consultancy portions first, which allows us to understand not only their needs and their desire, but also put our science to play. And then we turn into an implementation company for them to basically, I suppose, not only solve the issue they might have on the biz dev standpoint, but also doing so in a way in which is sustainable. So that was really the key differentiator, I suppose. And the problem that I identified in markets was, let's make marketing credible again. Let's make marketing viable again, and perhaps a bit more formal as well. Nothing wrong with young folks starting companies and perhaps lacking the corporate elements, but I still think the formality is necessary when you're dealing with bigger clients.
Yeah, 100%. And as you're saying, with young founders and coming through, I'm sure we've got a lot of listeners that can resonate with that, and opening to help and pushing through is great. So walk us through your offer evaluation. How has what you sell and who you sell to changed since you started?
It's a good question. So the way the business operates is very much of a full service model. One thing that we found basically as another very key issues was basically company dealing only in consulting, which is nothing wrong with that. But as we speak right now, obviously, as and I'm sure you know very well, the consultancy basically now is done through technology mainly and can be done in a way in which is much more sustainable, way cheaper. And therefore, the consultancy piece alone, without basically a clear hands-on model that will allow them to flourish and implement such a consultancy, I think will be slowly dying in the next decade. That's my opinion. And therefore, we were basically saying, all right, how can we combine basically consultancy and the implementations with basically a
Mm.
tier-based model, which allow us to have a low-ticket model, which is purely based on the implementation of the science within the plan, which probably about 10% of the people were going about. Smaller companies just want to pick our brain concerning how that science look for, what's best for them basically to use medium-wise for their business plan, but without basically any core centricas, obviously employees and people within the organizations to actually implement such a plan. And that's where basically a lot of our model shifted over months. We're still very young company, about 14 months in business now, but we're shifting basically more and more into this concierge level based marketing services, where the true differentiator of what we have is that not only we can obviously establish a model in which through database of the data that we control, but also the neuroscience, it will make it basically fully clever, fully novel, very easy to operate and to make flourish. But what we found is that from a neurobiological standpoint, only 3 to 8% of people can lead themselves basically to actually implement it at the highest level, which that's a very poor success rate, obviously.
Yeah.
And that said was like, that's fine. And there's still some smaller clients which we'd love to help, but we do that more from a charity standpoint, to be honest, and than a true business model. Where we make the big money is very much where we become either fully the marketing departments of a company. We do that with a lot of funded startups. I'd say 75% of our audience now are funded startups. So people that receive either pre-seed or Series A. And so
Hmm.
most of the time they will have a marketing person, a CMO, but without the perhaps the depth within their personnel, the depth within their employments to actually move forward with the implementation of it. That's why they need an agency, and that agency is Centrica. And then the next 25%, like I said, is where we become an extension of the business development departments with bigger companies like American Express, for example, was, and I hopefully will be a client, long-stay client with us, where obviously they have all the bells and whistles, they have all the marketing departments, just looking to acquire our science for specific projects. So that's basically where the business model thrive is consultancy. We make sure that we understand the four pillars of marketing as we understand them, come up with a plan basically that is fully curated with the objective and variables that we have identified, and then have a team, do what we call a super team inside of Core Centrica to fully take care on a white glove approach, take our clients to greatness.
Yeah, I love that. And to be starting, as you say, was it 14 months ago? And pushing
Yeah,
through from
14
there and
months ago.
looking, love that. So, how is your business currently generating revenue today? What is the core offer and the pricing model?
Yeah, so the core offer, everything starts with a meaningful discovery process. So that's a core offer. That's basically a price that you pay to engage professionally with us, and that will vary basically based on the stage of business that you're in. So there's three basically different pricing on that one. That all includes basically different nuggets and different perhaps I suppose advantages concerning the rest of your stay
Okay.
with us. And then what we do afterwards is basically a retainer model. So we do what we call the 90 days a meaningful sprint. So that's just basically to get a 90-day to really try the science, basically incorporating into your plan and making sure that we also work well together. That's another thing, Olivia, that I want to mention. But I've been blessed enough in my life and will continue to be able to choose my clients. So I want this to be very clear. The reason why this a 90-day first is because sometimes there's personality kerfuffle. Sometimes there's all sorts of things that when you bound yourself to a longer contract might arise, which I want not only for myself, but mainly for my team to avoid. So that's the way we monetize it. We monetize every step of the way. And afterwards, we become basically a traditional implementation done for you company. So we have a team of super team, perhaps inside of Core Centrica, a project manager, everybody else basically that is required to be working on that deal. So for example, if we're tackling branding and you're doing an exhibitions in Cannes, for example, one of our clients is going to be featured at Cannes this year in France, obviously very popular festival. You need an exhibit, you need a narrative for it. So basically you need obviously a creative art director, a copywriter, and basically other people that that perhaps just oppose within these missions is what I call is what we call a super team. Typically, anywhere from 4 to 8 people, depending on
Mhm.
different deals and the size of it from our perspective. And or the high tickets, basically, high tickets portions of the market, no doubt. So multiple five figures per contract, sometimes six, 2 or 7. But it's always a pleasure to again work with people in which understand marketing as an investment. That's very much
Yeah.
the key differentiator.
Yeah, I love that. And I suppose you mentioned there cans and all these big expeditions that you can put yourself into and get yourself in front of people, and then from there move on and elect who you found suitable for yourself. So, how are you currently acquiring these customers? What channels and methods are you finding most effective?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So we do have a multi-channel approach. So we do a lot of public relationships, like I said, making sure that to me personally, Olivia, and I don't know your take on it, but what I see from a marketplace standpoint is that most of the top of the funnel, basically traffic nowadays come from short form contents. So everything basically relating to shorts, content creations, things in which people can just dabble into who you are, what you do, find it interesting. But what I love with branding, basically, because I think branding and marketing are two different things, just as an FY. I think marketing is basically the how you communicate to the prospects to basically not only show them what you have, but also get them interested. And then the branding is why they close. Branding is basically the reason why they choose you over anybody else. So because of the top of the funnel approach that is much more geared towards short form contents, we do very well. LinkedIn is definitely a big channels for us, both on the direct messages standpoint and on the content creations. We have a great podcast in which I have basically a software pushing basically different posts every single day. That's where most of the website traffic comes from. That's where most basically of the top of the funnel visibility comes from is typically LinkedIn, either LinkedIn podcast directly or some paid ads that we're doing with Google paired with SEO retargeting. That's top of the funnel. But truly what I found and what I always invite everybody to do, because I think it is so important and perhaps so helpful when especially when you're a young company, is understanding the stages within this funnel and understanding that the game, perhaps, as I like to call it, as Alex and Mosey will
Hmm.
call it, is evolving so quickly that you need to understand that nowadays people make decisions specifically on the B2B side way differently than even a few years ago. So long form content now is an absolute must. You want long form content to be able to not only nurture that audience, but also invite them into what I call low engagements CTA. Sign up for my newsletter. Hey, we have this new offer. It's a low ticket offer to try us out. Something around those lines, because the nurturing piece, and especially with AI nowadays, will be so crucial. Not only is crucial, but will be even more crucial as customization is more and more allowed by these type of models. So for us, everything basically concerning that second and third stage of the funnel is purely based basically on not only informations but also direct contact point with them in a type of introduction meetings,
Yeah.
strategic meeting based on the different CTAs, and most importantly long form content. That we have a drip campaigns that we use Go High Level as a CRM, and we have a drip campaign basically that allows us to basically being very interestingly being able to segment our audience per keywords, per tags, as they call it in the CRM, and doing so in a way in which obviously we know the science that no other marketing agency in the world has, which is the Clinical Institute science. And therefore, we have an automation systems that tags and segment the audience basically not only in demographics, psychographics, but also basically in what we call biological preferences. So everybody basically gets a different drip, but it's always based on long form content in which they can learn to know me, learn to know the employees, learn to know why we're doing this in a way in which is very revolutionary to this market. So just to summarize, perhaps what's really working well for us is top of the funnel, short form contents. LinkedIn has been first for sure. I am also dabbling into other channels, but LinkedIn works so well for us that we're,
Yeah.
we're pretty much doubling down on it. And then afterwards, being able to attract them to low tickets or basically no strings attached CTAs, such as newsletter, nurturing those basically through long form contents and basically tiering it in a way. And I always say this to young entrepreneurs: at the very first, find one offer, bet your house on it and just try to monetize it. But you'll get to a point where that offer works very well, and differentiating basically that audience the best possible will be one of your main job, because the truth is, as you'll be involving within this way in which you're putting the steps, basically the scale together, will be very important, that they can slowly but surely all get to your main pricing ticket items, even if that was not the case initially when you were talking with them. So pairing those with alternative offers, with promote obviously promotional offers, is very good for scarcity. So those are typically the way we're doing this. Is we have a sales team as well that does direct engagements, which will turn them into basically that type of the funnel, and then the rest is pretty much all automated. And that has been a very, very proven format for us, and working pretty well for generating leads. About, as we speak right now, about 60 qualified leads a week. So we're in a
Nice.
pretty nice space.
Yeah, 100%. And you've got the whole structure. So you've got long-term nurture, the short-term, moving through the content, the structure behind, and the pathway is very clear. But what would you say is the biggest bottleneck for growth right now?
Fulfillment, no doubt. Definitely fulfillment. We've been to a place where obviously the very first of any business, your main struggle is getting clients. All right. I have an idea, I want to monetize it. How the hell do I do that?
Yeah.
Now I'm lucky enough basically to be a very young guy. And this is already my third. Well, actually, I have two businesses right now at the same time. My first one was successful. So I understand a thing or two about selling and getting people excited. So that was not a big problem. So basically, closing wise, we're extremely high, specifically because of the science we're using also. But the fulfillment has been one thing that I'm learning the ropes of, basically, especially on an agency standpoint, having the right people at the right place, making sure that we have a pricing structure which we can compensate them ideally. All the fulfillment portion of it is definitely where the most about the bottleneck is. We get people excited, get people closed, get people paid, and then afterwards, the real sell actually begins after they give you
Yeah.
their money. That's what I
Love
think.
that.
And so that's where the second stage of Core Central will come into actions. Is now we're incredible actually comparatively to the average in everything, and we're slightly above average on fulfillment, which I'd like to be much better. And that's the main bottleneck, and perhaps what we will be aiming to accomplish the next 6 months.
Awesome. And then what does the next 6 months look like? How do you see core criteria growing and taking it over?
Yeah. So I suppose right now the cash flow basically is keeping us afloat. So we have a few investors that will be reinvesting inside the company, which will allow us to again take care of that fulfillment portions, making sure that we obviously hire top talents, delegate way better. I'm reading Richard Brunson basically autobiography right now because he's the king of delegation, and he's proved it countless time. So that's the main priority, and I suppose how we're going to be doing that is through again influx of cash from an angel, keeping our client base structured and engaged and obviously profitable, and most importantly, making sure that we grow upon that fulfillment periods to a point where I have utterly confidence in them, completely basically let them do their thing, so I can focus even more on brand valuations and what I do best, which is to excite people and get them into my company. So we're probably about, I'd say, 3 months away from that. If you extend that to 6 months, I think that Core Centrica is going to be in more and more countries. So we're already in 7 countries right now as we speak. But I have huge aspirations on
That,
the international stage. And perhaps I don't know exactly what drives it, but I just love this understanding in which we have a worldwide impact. And I understand that it's going a little bit outside of the norms of find a local niche market. To me, my niche is way more a specific avatar location in the world, since we're a fully online business. But it's that's one of the main objectives that I have, is going basically borderless even more than we do right now. And if you extend that to 12 months, then it's definitely being able to be seen personally. So there's two things. Obviously, there's the business brand and then there's a personal brand. And I'm a huge proponent of funder-led basically growth and funder-led companies, just because we've been seeing this work so well. The margins increases because your CEO is well known. There's all sorts of business advantages. So in a year from now, I would love myself to be basically seen as basically a world-class marketer even more. Been featured last year on the marketing forums on the LA Times. That was one lovely thing, but I'd love to do more on that to just reassert, I suppose, myself into some of the conversation about the best marketers basically in the world. And I think that will give us perhaps the spotlight that is necessary to continue upon this vision of ours, which is to fully revolutionize the world of done for you marketing.
Yeah, and I suppose what is currently preventing you from scaling that faster, and how are you addressing those challenges at the moment?
So the first thing is obviously resources, monetary resources. So that's why we're
Yeah,
seeking, that's why basically the angels are reinvesting into it. That will help us a lot with basically, like I said, making sure the fulfillment is taken care of, freeing up some of my time on the operation standpoint, working more and more on the brand valuations and make it happen in the next 6 to 12 months. That's pretty much basically work those. That's the documents are already signed. So that's that second round from that angel will be happening next 2 weeks at the very latest. And so we're working extremely rapidly. For me, the vision of the company when you're thinking about it from a purely business development standpoint, it's always about taking care of my people. To me, there's a very nuanced balance between being underscale and overstaff. And that we just trying to basically very delicately utilize such a balance as a point of as a guide, perhaps. And that's where basically will be necessary for me to come back on the brand valuation alongside my sales teams to make sure that we have the necessary client influx to sustain basically the fulfillment team that will be growing. And that is the delicate balance and harmony, perhaps, that we'll be seeking and aiming at for the next 6 to 12 months.
awesome, love that. And you mentioned that you got the influx from the investments coming in,
Yes.
and how you're looking to, what changes are you looking to implement and then to accelerate growth with that
Few
resource?
Yeah, so a few things. SOPs on the fulfillment side, no doubt, as the team will be growing. I don't want to be the one basically needing to train basically every single one of them without clear education. So making sure that we have our best people doing basically an SOP, which is already happening right now. So making sure that he has the bandwidth to do that. And then making sure that we basically have less and less of a human training, which is quite tedious, take a lot of time, take a lot of resources as well, and more of a basically self-growth fulfillment training programs. There's still going to be obviously a point of anchor, a human point of anchor, but doing so in a way in which we can leverage technology in an alternative model, school model, where basically you have your own assignments. It's basically a program that is fully led by how much time you put into it. Most of our salespeople are commissioned only before they hit a certain plateau of monetary amount for the company. So that's where most of the resources will be spent is taking care of our people. And most importantly, how can we make sure that we turn Core Centrica into a fulfillment machine with the right
Yeah,
trainings and the right SOPs in place?
nice. And now we're just going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to go through a lightning round just to finish off. So,
Sure.
what's one tool or resource that you found as a big game changer in the business so far?
Go high level. Not even
So,
close. Go high level is fantastic. I love Go High Level a lot. It's a perfect no. I have direct contact with the CEO of Go High Level and the founders, and they're great people, by the way. I really love them. But it's fantastic tools. For me, we live in a data-driven, obviously, world, and the most important things is how do you intelligently use that data for future growth? That's the bottom line. And
yeah,
one tool that does this much has been extremely, and it's been incredible for us. It's a flat price model for all of our users as well. So it's accommodating for a growing team. I think it is nothing short of extraordinary. And yeah, Go High Level has been huge, by far the most important tool.
yeah, I'm actually very personal. I've used Go High Level a lot in my career coming through as well, and I would 100% agree. It's so simple, systematic, 100%. So, what's the best piece of advice that you've received about scaling a business?
Your clients are your best salespeople. I think that when you're starting, you have this big emphasis on just bringing clients in without sort of a misalignment or misunderstanding, perhaps, of how important the fulfillment is. And that was my mistake at first. But you want to understand that the more you take your basically care of your clients, the more basically the least you need salespeople, and that's the real bottom line of that equations is that nowadays basically about 80% of the deals that actually close are basically referral based from people that are already clients of ours, which is a fantastic ratio, obviously. So always understand that when you're bringing a new clients on, it can either be basically a very positive lights at the end of that relationship, if there is such an end. Hopefully, you can keep on having them for basically forever if you have a business model that allows such thing, which our model does. But you want to also understand the negative impacts of not taking care of one, which are humongous. So always understand that your customers, they are not always right, but you want to make them feel they're always right, and they are your best salespeople by far.
Awesome. And now, what advice would you give to any founders listening who are looking to start on their own journey?
sit down with yourself and get to know yourself before you jump into any business. When you look at the greatest people, the greatest business people, what they have as an edge is they're not more motivated. Typically, they're not more disciplined, even though obviously some are, but definitely not more intelligence. You want to understand that everything around yourself in the world has been built by people no more intelligent than yourself. You have everything you need that is already within yourself. Obviously, seek mentorships, seek to get great advice. That's not my point, but understand that you are full regardless of what you extrinsically do. And from that, I want you to understand that for this to be a success, not just a successful business, I think that's actually quite like slightly overrated. If you want a successful life, you'll need to enjoy it. You want to enjoy it every step of the way. Obviously, there will be downs, there will be lows, specifically as a business owners. But you want to understand that you need to find more about yourself. Put your vision and your mission on a piece of paper, and that's really what you want to do for yourself, not for impressing your perhaps your unloving parents or your unloving friends, or the fact that this girl rejected you when you were 13. You want to understand that for this to be a success, hopefully a successful life, like I said, not just business, you want to understand that you'll need to be selfish enough so you can be selfish later. And when you understand yourself at a very young age, it is a superpower because most are running around completely lost, doesn't have a glimpse of an idea what they want to do, which God bless them, by the way. But if you want to get ahead of the pack, stop with these, do these three things, and you'll be a millionaire in 6 months. Sit down with yourself, understand who you are and what you love, and understand which problems in the world needs to be solved that also encompass your ikigai, which is a great book, by the way, if you want to pick it up, and understand the merge of your passions, your missions, and your skills in a way in which you can monetize it that makes you smile, that actually you crave it. It becomes a video game, it becomes an addiction to grow business because you love what you do and the value you provide. And that's my base piece of advice.
Absolutely love that coming from a young founder himself. Solid. And that's a wrap on another inspiring episode of Founders Future. I want to thank Sam for sharing his incredible journey and insight with us today. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to Future via whatever you listen to your favorite podcast. You can also find more resources and insights at closers.io, where we're dedicated to helping businesses accelerate their sales and marketing efforts through world-class systems and playbooks. Until then, keep climbing, and we will see you on the next one.